Hello, I'm Jason Chancoco, one of the senior fellows or alumni fellows for this year's Iligan National Writers Workshop. The question now is, what is my poetics? As you can see, I am outdoors. Now, my poetics is always rooted to my being a Filipino, a Bicolano, and to my being a farm owner, my being an outdoorsman, prepper slash survivalist, and Filipino martial arts enthusiast. So, where am I coming from? I am a Bicolano who was born in Metro Manila, particularly Pasay City. And despite this fact, I grew up in Bicol and only studied in Manila much later during college. Tara pare! Being a Bicolano who was born in Manila, who also studied under the Philippine school system, needless to say, I am proficient in various Philippine languages, including Bicol, Bicol Naga, Iriganon, Tagalog, and of course English. So ano yan? Sumbiling?
Pana.
Pana. Anong narakop mo niyan?
Mga set. Pasag.
Yo boy, salamat. Needless to say, my being a writer is always influenced by my being proficient in English, Tagalog, Filipino, Bicol Naga, and Iriganon. And of course, always influenced by my milieu. Tools such as bow and arrow or the sumbiling, tools by simple people would often end up as a staple for my poetic projects. For one, a premium Bicol blade like this minasbad became one of the major images or central images of one of my poetic projects that I actually submitted for this particular workshop. In that particular poem, the minasbad became a symbol of indigenous people's empowerment. The same with the sea in the poem The Bajau Captain, or in the poem The Spectator. Needless to say, for my poetry, I use images that are just all around me. I use them so that I could get my message across. I use images from rural settings as well as images from the city. But somehow, I am more of a nature poet and very much concerned with the environment. Now, poems arrive to me already having their own language. I just listen to them and they arrive either in English, Filipino, Bicol Naga, Iriganon. I just listen to the sound that reverberates inside my skull. Poems choose their own language, as far as I'm concerned. Now, I subscribe to the adage that the poet is not necessarily the voice that we hear in the poem. So in my poetry, I usually wear masks. I usually assume different personas. I could be an agta, I could be a warrior, I could be a mother, I could be a child. Different personas. I assume different voices. For me, it's easier for the poet to be grounded or to delve into the various political, historical, artistic, or poetic context of the poem if he or she would wear a different kind of mask, a persona different from his own persona. In such a way, the poet would now be able to achieve a different poetic clearing, a different artistic temperament and playground. Therefore, to arrive at poetry is a difficult task. We can say it can be likened to a difficult trek for a hiker or a mountaineer. You know, a rocky trail like this one. But there's always somewhere to go when you start to capture the poem or the sound of the poem in your head. It is something primordial, really, so congenital, so very much part of our human consciousness, something that we share with the early people during the early days, the sound of the poem inside our heads. So most of the time, to be able to listen to the sound of the poem, I stop and meditate. I go to places like this, the woods, being that I happen to be a farm owner, I happen to be an outdoorsman. So here in this area, I try to construct the poem, or at least I try to germinate the poem inside my head. And to be honest about it, I could really listen to the voice of the poem already having its own language, already having its own tone. Now, the persona in the poem, as I said, will have a particular tone. So, likewise, I listen to the tone of the poem inside my head. More often than not, the poem itself will provide for it. Is the persona being ironic, insulting? Is the persona angry, worried? It's easier to capture it when you actually listen to it inside your head. The way I try to listen to the sound of the waterfalls here. Because for me, poetry is meant to be heard, so its genesis must be sound. Same way that I immerse with nature, I immerse to the universe of the poem. As I said, I listen to the voice of the poem, I listen to the tone of the poem, and I achieve it by going outdoors, by trying to experience the outdoors. Even if it's an urban setting, or it could be a rural setting like this one. I studied various poetic forms. Bicol poetic forms, Tagalog poetic forms, English poetic forms, European forms. But right now, somehow, the poem in my head would likewise present its own form. When I write in English, it's usually a case of stream of consciousness, but somehow influenced by modernist poet T.S. Eliot with his objective correlative doctrine. So if you will observe, most of my points in English are in free verse and with run-on lines. Jose Jason Chancoco here for the Iligan National Writers Workshop. This is my poetics. This is how I write. This is how I reassert my existence. Thank you so much.
Yan ba si Magal?